but you really have to understand what the incentives are. So you have to just understand not only what kind of gets you moving, but what the other side is truly interested in. And then you just have to be a good communicator so that you can just build positive energy and get everybody excited about the work that you're about to do, if it's something that requires working together going forward.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 343, and we're back today to continue our conversation around negotiations, deal making, relationships, and your music career. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me, as always, is Circa, and we have a very special guest with us today, our friend Dame Ritter from Two Lost Music Entrepreneur Club. Dame's joining us today as we were wrapping up recording on last week's episode. He and I were having a conversation, and he said to me, man, I would have loved to be a part of talking about deal making and negotiation in the music industry. And we said, let's do another one. So we're back this week to continue our chat with Dame. Welcome to the show, man. Thanks for being here, and welcome back.
Man, it's my pleasure. I always enjoy catching up with my indiepreneur fam. Negotiations it's such an important topic. I don't think a lot of young people recognize it as a skill that kind of needs to be developed. So excited to jump into some of the details here.
Me too, man. I think actually that's a really great place to start, is negotiation as a skill, because last week we talked a lot about deals, standard deals, legalese, contract language, and I definitely want to talk about your experience with that topic in particular as well. But I'd love to just start off with your thoughts and maybe go a little bit deeper into your opinion on negotiation as a skill, how you develop it, how you've developed it over time, and where you've recognized it from all angles of the work that you do in the industry, both from your work now at Two Lost to your record label work to management work and so on and so forth.
Yeah, no, I had a life prior to my music life, and I think I don't know, I can't remember if it was a full class or at least a portion of a class in business school. Might have been in our leadership class where we covered negotiation and just how to prepare for negotiations, understanding that it's a skill. But I think ultimately you just have to engage and learn from your experiences a lot of times and get feedback. And over time, develop the confidence, the preparedness that's necessary when having a conversation with someone that you're trying to work something out with. So I think, and you didn't ask this question in particular, but I think a lot of times independent teams or independent artists, like probably one of the biggest mistakes I see is just the short-sightedness of the conversation or what they think they're trying to accomplish. I think when you're talking with somebody, you have to fully understand, what do you really want out of this deal? Is it just this deal? Are you never, ever going to see this person ever again? Is this a relationship that you're trying to build? You're trying to do multiple deals with, hopefully. So you just have to think a lot before even going into the negotiation. Like, what are we really trying to get out of this? And I just don't think a lot of that preparedness or thought is done before having some of these conversations.
Do you ever end up in scenarios where the paper you're getting, like the first lob from the other party, is so off base that you feel like, I don't even know where to start negotiations? Does that ever happen to you?
Oh, yeah. No, it does. And sometimes, sometimes that kind of lets me know that maybe a deal can't be done. And that's okay. That's okay at the end of the day. Like, if you show me kind of your first offer and I know that that we're so far apart, let's put those details to the side and let's have a conversation about where we're coming from, or like I said, maybe a deal just can't be done. And that's okay. You don't take it personal. It's just, hopefully everybody wants to do something that's fair. Everybody believes that they want to do something that's fair, but people have different interpretations on what fair means. Like, you can value something completely different than me, and that's not anything malicious. That we just have a difference of opinion on what this thing is worth or how we value this particular situation. So sometimes you need more information. Sometimes, okay, doesn't sound like we're going to be able to do a deal here. Let's just wait. And over a year's time, we collect more data, we collect more information, and maybe we come back to the table, or maybe we've progressed so far that now working with you doesn't really make sense for us. And you should have made the deal earlier in the year. So
last episode, like I've introduced the idea of, because people might not be familiar, like how much insurance signing goes on in the industry, where the deal is really insurance for your counterparty that you don't get bigger than you are right now. If they can get you for cheap, they'll buy that insurance cheap. And if you get one of those deals, like you might think, oh, I can negotiate this up. And it's like, they're not really looking to negotiate. This is just an insurance play for them. And so it's like useful to have a way to define like your range. If you get some paperback, what's the furthest it is from where you want to be, where you'll consider negotiation, you know?
Yeah. So when you guys were talking about this in the first episode, was it specifically about like signing to a label, like that type of deal? Or was it more, is it all kind of things like brand partnerships, different collaborations, things like that?
I would say if we were, a lot of the discussion folded in around the realm of like deals where indies could get screwed. So it's more things like publishing deals, production management, packaging deals, and then record deals.
Got it. Yeah, because obviously negotiation, you have to negotiate for a whole bunch of different things as you progress in the music industry. It could be a brand partnership. It can be a photographer. It could be somebody just doing some work for you. Like we probably negotiate every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah, we probably left a lot on the table there because like when I think of a brand partnership, I can't even think of a scenario where they're going to be so far away from like reality that it's not even worth a discussion, you know?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, because obviously at this point we've negotiated quite a few brand deals, and I know artists typically, if you haven't had partnerships with a brand, you probably inclined, especially if there's money involved, like just take whatever just to start learning and better understanding your value. But over time, as you start to get offers from other companies and you have more experience and your views or streams and presence starts to go up, like how do you properly continue to value yourself or scale up as you progress in your career? And I don't know if there's ever a time where we do it like perfectly, because I know with Big Ja, obviously you have a great relationship with Blue Chew, and they sponsored our latest web series, The Lesbian Homie 3. And what I said to the offer that I gave them initially, they said yes to it way too fast. So I knew,
you were like, oh, I could have, I should have for more.
So I knew I messed up in that moment. I was like, that was way too fast.
They're like, boom, yes. And you're like, damn it.
That is exactly what happened. But we've been working with them for so long. They've been super supportive, and I think they've recognized the value that we've returned. They've never shown me any numbers, and I think they probably would show them to me. You probably should ask for them if you're working with a brand partnership. I mean, if you're working with a brand, and especially if it's something like an affiliate link or something like that, so you can really see how much traction you're bringing. However, I don't think the value is just like the direct sales. I don't like affiliate only partnerships, because even if nobody buys anything from the link that we put in the video, you still got a bunch of brand awareness, and there's some value to that, because people might not purchase it from my video, but they might have saw it, and maybe they saw another ad, and it just, typically you got to hit people over the head a few different times before they take action. And maybe our video was just one of those hits, but it contributed eventually to a sale. But ultimately, that's still brand awareness and us promoting the link and the brand in the video. So I typically stay away from just affiliate situations. I guess the times that I might consider it is, one, if it is a pretty high percentage that we get from the sales, like it's 40%, 50%, something like that. And it's something that I really feel like our community would value and purchase. Or maybe two, it's something like it's a really cool brand just to be affiliated with. That might be cool too. So
you raise a really good point there about the nature of what brand awareness and like a customer journey for a brand. I can think of times that I've probably been exposed to products that I actually did end up buying, and I probably was initially exposed to them from a creator that I liked, or a channel, or an artist, or whatever, but I probably didn't, because I can't think of any times where I've actually used an affiliate link. Very rarely have I used an affiliate link. I've definitely bought lots of stuff from recommendations of people that I like. It just took me a little while to do it. And you're right. I most likely just went right to the business's website or their online store or whatever, and I purchased. So yeah, that's a really good point. And I think a strong negotiating point if you're offered an affiliate only kind of deal.
Yeah. Because even here at Two Lost, like we have podcasts that we work with, like podcast partners, and we give them a discount code for their podcast. But I can't just tell them like, oh, we're only going to acknowledge like the effectiveness of this partnership via these codes that we give out. No, I know that we're increasing the brand awareness so that when we start pouring money into paid ads, I feel like that brand awareness will lead to more conversions with our paid ad, because this paid ad probably wasn't the first time that you saw Two Lost.
Yeah. Also, if you drop like a branded search campaign, like where did those search terms come from? Why are people searching you?
Yeah. So just going back to negotiating, you don't expect to get it perfect. I still don't get it perfect. Like I just said, I next time negotiating with Blue Chew, I'm going to suggest a much higher number so that we can come down from that, as opposed to just going with that number. So you don't get it right every time, but ultimately, like my goal is to just build healthy relationships that we can keep going back to, because it sucks. You might do one brand partnership and you think like you got a really good deal because you got a lot of money, but then you didn't return value, so they never come back to you. That they feel like they got ripped off, right? Oh, we paid these folks 25 grand and we didn't feel like we got anything, and they were tough to deal with. They didn't communicate well. So now you have to scramble and look for another partner the next time. And you just don't want to be in that position where you're like always scrambling for new partners. And it looks weird to your fans too, where you're always promoting something new. So even though I feel like we could have gotten more money out of the last deal with Blue Chew, I know that we hit it out the park and we're going to be able to come back to the table for another conversation.
For sure. Yeah. And something I've always really admired about you through numerous deals that I've seen you work on over the years, or partnerships that you've been trying to build, is you've always, just in general about marketing that we've worked on together, like you've always been very data driven. And I know that you bring data to the conversation and to deal making, knowing about email list numbers, knowing about customer list numbers, and what value that has to a potential partner is always something that you're acutely aware of. And I think that's something that is especially important to underline when it comes to brand deals, for sure, because there's a lot you can do there. But also it applies broadly to any kind of deal making that you might be doing, for the most part. If you're negotiating a deal with your photographer, maybe not, unless you're going to promote your photographer after the fact. I don't know. You never know.
Yeah, because from the photographer perspective, yeah, they're interested in getting paid, but they also want to collect fans from you as well. So if you have a bigger presence, that should be of value to that photographer if you agree, because it's not only, all right, you might agree to a certain dollar amount, but then you have to make sure that you agree to tag them and let people know that these are the folks that took these photos. So when you're negotiating, you're definitely not only negotiating just a dollar amount. There's so many other things that you can negotiate that are of value that can make the deal better on both sides.
I definitely have my opinion and feelings and recommendations that I've made to artists over the years about this, but I would be curious to hear yours when it comes to gathering that data ahead of time and how to present it in a way that is non-confrontational and conscious of the fact that you're trying to build a relationship. Like we kicked off the episode talking about, is like you look critically at what kind of deal you're trying to make and decide, is this a transactional or is this transformational, relational, or where does it fall on the spectrum? So yeah, I'm curious of your thoughts on how to go about thinking about your data and your leverage when considering those relationship types.
Yeah, I think we typically put together a deck for specific partners if we're talking with somebody new. And it's always great to get an idea of what their goal is, especially when it comes to brands. Like their goal might be to be something very specific, right? It might be to grow our YouTube presence or grow our Instagram presence. Now when you put together that deck, not only should you put all your metrics in there, but you probably key in on the Instagram components and really highlight that, but then also highlight like what you can do to potentially pull some levers to drive Instagram followers. So when you're talking with a brand, you really want to understand what their goal is. Like, what do they want out of this? Do they want to drive direct sales? That could be a totally different campaign than to just boost social media following on a particular platform. Do they want to capture emails? We need to know this because we can do things that are very specific to accomplish those goals.
Man, there's such a wealth of information you have in negotiating these brand deals that like we can't really provide. We don't do a whole lot of brand deal negotiation. So it's like there's that avenue to explore. There's also like, I imagine that you have a lot more rubber meets the road negotiation experience than I do, because it's more often that I'm like reviewing a friend's contract and being like, just don't sign this. And like, I don't know if they're going to come any inches on this because it's so terrible to begin with. But
there's a lot, especially folks that come from a more traditional music era. Like, because a fair deal, no matter how you define fair, has changed over time. Even the deals that we used to offer artists when I ran Funk Volume probably wouldn't be like fair today. They were more than fair at the time, but as artists have gotten more control and can do so much more on their own, they've gained more leverage over time. And I think that the folks that come from a more traditional music era, like, they're probably jumping into this thinking like, oh man, this is the best deal ever. This is super fair, because they're used to royalty deals where the artist is getting like 14% and not owning their masters. So now if they offer like 50-50, they think it's amazing, but maybe that particular deal in this environment should be a more 70-30 on the artist side. You never, but I see a lot of that disconnect. It's typically a lot of folks from a more traditional era of music that are doing things more fair, but it still hasn't caught up to what the time that we're currently living in.
Like, fair is a moving target, and the younger generation always has a different view of it that's more artist favorable. Yeah.
But sometimes artists are going overboard this time. Like now, like they believe that they deserve so much that they're not going to find the deal that they're looking for. For example, I was recently talking to an artist team and I said, what is the perfect deal? Because they were telling me, we're not going to sign a slave deal. We're not going to sign anything that's not fair. And I asked them, I was like, what do you think a fair deal is right now? And they were like, a 90-10 split with a marketing budget that's unrecoupable. I'm like, how do you expect them to win?
For sure. And I think also like I run the risk of being misunderstood when I talk about these sorts of things, where it's like, oftentimes what I'm recommending people do is like, just do it yourself, because the thing that's right for you is not going to be even worth it for them in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
But if you are coming to the table and saying there are things I do not want to do myself and I really want this help, yeah, that changes the perspective of what is fair, because it's like they need to make something.
Yeah. No, I always use the Funk Volume deal that we signed with Warner, because we signed a direct label services deal with Warner back in 2014. And we didn't take that much of an advance. I think we got a $300,000 advance. And all we needed to give them was 17% of sales. And we got access to their publicity, some marketing support, things like that. But I even told the guys before this, yes, we're still going to be able to move independently. We can drop music whenever we want. But we do need to recognize that they're only getting 17% of our sales. And if we really want them to move, then we really have to put in a lot of work. And we need to be we got to crush it, number one, or just sales wise. But number two, we really have to be in this building, making sure that people like genuinely just like us. And that's the piece that I don't think the fellas really understood, because I think from their standpoint, oh, we're working with a major now. They should just be pushing these buttons and making us fly.
So you guys got a deal that really gave you resources, but didn't give you hands off, we don't need to do anything, which should, in theory, try to incentivize the artist and the team to do the work that they need to do with more resources than you had before.
Yeah. So we got resources. We just didn't get priority. You know what I'm saying? We would have to work for that priority. We have to build this thing to a point where they're like, okay, this 17%, either the 17% is meaningful or we're creating enough noise that it just reflects good on their brand. Like, they can tell other artists and other potential people that they work with, oh, we have funk volume over here. We have to get that big, where that's a value. And that's a lot of work, and I don't think we were just prepared to do that kind of work, or I didn't think the guys really understood the position. And maybe I did a bad job of communicating it, but it was definitely something that I was mindful of going into it. And I at least tried to communicate it, but it's tough.
That's a really interesting lesson to hear from you 10 years later, 2020, because I imagine you've carried that with you since then in other deals that you've made and other partnerships that you've forged.
Yeah, it's really just about aligning incentives, understanding and aligning incentives. If you can align incentives appropriately, you can probably get any deal done, but you really have to understand what the incentives are. So you have to just understand not only what kind of gets you moving, but what the other side is truly interested in. And then you just have to be a good communicator so that you can just build positive energy and get everybody excited about the work that you're about to do, if it's something that requires working together going forward.
Yeah, yeah. And aligning incentives, like, I love that. That's what very early on I realized, man, it's beneficial if I'm in a deal or in some kind of arrangement with someone where we both win along the same axes of analysis. But later on, I also learned that it's also important that your counterparty lose if you lose. Because if they win when you win, but if you lose, they're fine. Like, it's not actually aligned incentives. It's like they just get the free ride. It's like a lottery ticket.
Yeah. But it's something that you constantly have to do. It's very difficult to pursue this alone. So you're going to be talking with people that you bring onto the team, people you collaborate with. That's how you should be thinking about all the conversations you have. Just getting an understanding of, even when I hired somebody here at Tula, so I just hired a marketing manager. And I really want to understand what he wants out of this position for him to progress in his career, so that I make sure that I'm giving him the experience that aligns with that, so that he wants to be here. He's working hard. So that's on me as a manager to understand all of that. Because at the end of the day, like, I want to do the best work possible, and I want to be very impactful in our roles. And I need him to be able to do that. So I need him excited and ready to work. So we're negotiating all the time. We're trying to align incentives all the time just to produce our desired results.
Yeah, it's wild that you mentioned aligned incentives, because just last week, literally the day before you and I were talking about doing this podcast, my coach, Dan Martell, was talking to us about aligning incentives amongst your team. So you bringing it up here and talking about your new team member, it's the same story. Like, aligning incentives is one of those business keys, I think, whether you're talking about internal relationships with staff, employees, team members, business partners, or external clients, partnerships, deals, whatever it might be. It's one of those it's one of those magic things that you have to know about, and the sooner you can recognize it, the better.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask if you have any examples of like negotiations you've been through where you learned the most in some of that, like in the quadrant of negotiations that are more like your typical music industry, like negotiations, aside from like brand partnerships. Is there like anywhere where like you had a conflict that you resolved where you learned, okay, I actually can do this, or this is how this should work, or anywhere where you got burned where you're like, I don't want to do this in the future? Like,
and I think when we signed artists, there was typically a lot of back and forth. But for me, you never want to get taken advantage of, but you're always in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, look, it's much better that we do this than not. So I don't mind giving a little, because I know I need that. I know for the long term, I need this to happen. Like, I want this to happen. So even if I have to give up a little more on my end to make it happen, to make them happy, it's better doing the deal than working with another artist or finding something else. So I know that. So sometimes you might think of it as like a short-term L, but you still will put that W on the board because you're going to complete that project or get some cool stuff out the door that then you can capitalize and do bigger things. So again, it's always about having a long-term outlook on things and don't be so short-sighted. We're talking with, now that I'm in kind of the television and film space, or trying to get into the television and film space with Ja, like, we realized that we need to work with other people to just get more content out the door. right? So we need to work with other producers, other writers. So we're constantly negotiating with these new folks. And I know that we're not going to get it right out the gate, but we need to bring more people on in order to move faster. And if we should have made a little bit more on this next project, we end up giving up a little bit too much. All right, let's just learn from that on the next project. But I need to go through that experience to have more data to better understand how to appropriately compensate or more fairly compensate people going forward, because this is our first time working with people and there's a lot of variables involved. So let's stop going back and forth so much. Let's get the shit done and then just learn from it, as opposed to everybody, nah, man, I need this, I need that, and then eventually the project that doesn't get done, there's no data now, there's nothing I can learn from it.
I've always called that getting the suck out, which is like, there are things where I admit to myself, like, I'm not going to get out of this without being terrible at it. So I might as well optimize instead of for minimizing how terrible I am at it. I should maximize how much I learn from it and just accept that, like, yeah, I'm going to be bad at this.
Yeah, no. So there's a few different like teams that we're trying to work out deals with. For one is a new web series, and one is to do like a feature film. They came to the table. They said they have a $250,000 budget. We already have a script for something called The Whole Crew Is Stupid, but we took that script off the table because that script's worth more to us than a $250,000 budget. It needs to be done at a bigger scale, and we probably wouldn't give as much on that because we've built that brand over time. So I already knew that. So it's almost like, okay, let's just start from scratch and start with something that you guys write that we're on board with, so that we can get to a place where, of mutual agreement faster. We're figuring this out in real time. We're having all these different conversations, but at the end of the day, we know we need to get more content out the door. So let's just say we do a movie, and on this movie we make 100,000. But if we would have done the deal differently, we could have made 150,000 or something like that. Okay, 100,000 is 100,000 more than we would have gotten if we didn't do the movie in the first place. So let's just keep progressing forward like that. So yeah, think long term. Just think long term, and you got to move in this industry. You keep messing up deals left and right. Nobody wants to work with you. You're not going to really have too many options.
Something that sticks with me as we're talking about this is, if you're an artist and you're listening to this and you're chomping at the bit to get a deal, I think like the billboard that's lit up in bright lights for me from all the conversation we've had so far and what we talked about last week is like, protect yourself from getting absolutely obliterated, screwed on your first deal, and make sure that's not a deal that you take. And then for everything else that comes your way, think long term and figure out what you're willing to compromise, what you can make work, and know what you bring to the table.
Especially for stuff like if you're signing to a label or a manager or something like that, then you definitely, what I just said about just learning from it is, you may not want to learn for that long, right? Like you sign
Decide how long you want to learn.
Learn from it. Opportunities are confined to under, let's say, 2 years.
There was a cat. I'm not going to name his name, but I met him probably in 2011, 2012. We shared the same business manager at the time, and he had just signed his deal with a major record label. And I asked him why he signed the deal. He was like, man, Dame, I'm young enough, so if it doesn't work out, I'll just go back independent and continue doing my thing. And it didn't work out, and hadn't been able to catch the momentum again since then. Like, it just died out. So some of these situations, it's about timing. And if you got a little momentum, you can really mess that up if you don't align with the right label or people that can help continue to grow that momentum immediately.
Yeah, and also, like, not only the moment could pass, but your motivation and potential upside of doing your own thing independently could vanish as well. Or like, you could end up in a scenario where, yeah, I could do all I want independently, and it's going to go to someone else's mouth at the end of the day.
Yeah. But if you're talking about, like, other things like working with influencers to post your music, or how much you're going to pay them, it's stuff like that. Sometimes it's trial and error. and just make sure you do right by people so that you can continue these relationships, because you might build with an influencer and they start cutting you a deal because you bring so many deals to them and your music is good and it aligns with their audience anyway. So you just want to build healthy relationships with people so that, again, you're just not always going back to the drawing board trying to find new people for things all the time.
Yeah. And it's really like, we could even separate like these two types of contract and negotiations opportunities into like, I would say there's like the ones that are far more transactional, where it's like, this is closer to buying a product at a store than it is to like some kind of long-term agreement. And then there's your long-term agreements where like you really got to take out the fine tooth comb and make sure you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know, because brand partnerships like, and influencer deals and things like that, there's a lot less places that could go horrifically wrong than there is a four option record contract.
Yeah.
Oftentimes those people want to do business. Like they want to get something done and they want to do stuff and they want it to be relatively straightforward and like.
Yeah, I would agree with that kind of division of how you look at things. But like I said, just the communication is crucial. Preparing before you go into these conversations is crucial. Just knowing what you want out of this, just so important. But yeah, especially now as we're seeing at these major labels, everybody getting laid off, right? So now we're at a point where you don't have no choice but to be independent for most folks. You know what I'm saying? And so you're going to have to build a team that kind of replicates some of the things that you would get at a label if you were supported. So, and that's a very difficult thing to do. Like building teams, getting people on the same page is a very difficult thing to do. So, there's a lot of negotiation that happens when you're trying to build a team and just keep people happy as you guys progress. Should you guys do a lot better or things not go as well, just the communication that's required, it's very hard.
Yeah, it's kind of like really straightforward pricing mechanics to think about, like when you're building a team, for instance, versus if you are taking on a manager, you're taking on like a label. It's like the more you pay, the better a product you're likely to get if you've done your homework. And if you want the best like team member in their field, like you're going to pay a pretty penny for that. And you can only get so far with like negotiation, like in terms of like in the future, you have access to my result and our incentives are aligned. Yeah, that's great. But there is a ceiling on that. If you can't pay your team members, there's a ceiling on the quality of a team member that you're going to be able to get. Just like, if you're not willing to let go of X, there's a ceiling on the quality of like partner you're going to get out of a contract.
Yeah. And one of the things that just makes the music industry like specifically like more difficult to negotiate and kind of work things out, there's just a cloud of skepticism that hovers over it because of all the stories that we hear. We're always telling people to watch out, and all the movies that get made. I mean, there's no movies made about how well a label treated an artist or how well a manager treated an artist. That's not a movie that anybody is going to watch or have an interest in making.
Yeah.
So it's all movies about people getting taken advantage of, the drama. So that just creates, everybody's on guard. Everybody's on guard. Everybody's skeptical. So how do we break that down to even come to the table of just clear-headed and then just not just put our guards down for a second? It's tough.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, on the less transactional side of things, I always get sometimes like after a little while of not being in an industry interaction, start to think, am I kind of a blowhard? Is it not that bad out there? And I'm just filled with conspiracy theories or like tinfoil hat on. And then I'll like read some friend's paper and I'll be like, nah, it's pretty bad out there. There's definitely some shady cats. But like more recently, I've had to review like a litany of like sync agreements where I'm like, this is a pretty good contract. Like this, thank God, like you sent me some good paper.
From your perspective though, do you think that it's due to a lot of people out there just being malicious, or is it more like just no education?
There's first of all, like so many artists come to the table with no education in a way that is both frustrating and advantageous for counterparties. And sometimes they'll take the advantage because they deal with the frustration. You don't know enough that I'm just going to, one, deal with the fact that you're like being obtuse, and two, take advantage of it. I would say that I've definitely met malicious people. Like this particular instance where my friends were signing to management They had a manager in mind. Another member of their group had a different manager in mind that was friends with who they grew up with. And he had a big industry signee, someone, if I said their name, like everyone here would recognize, like songwriter turned artist. And so that guy is a packager. Does production agreements. And so they tried to do like a joint deal between these two management outfits, the guy and then like our friend's management firm. And the guy pitched paper. Like he took them out to dinner. He came to Orlando. Everything's all good. Like love is love. Sends paper. They send it to me. And I'm like, do you know what this says? This is nuts. Like he gets 50% of your career and then rushes you into a label as soon as possible and then gets 50% of that too. You're a part of it. And they were like, he said that he only gets his 50% comes from the label side. And I'm like, one, that's not how it works. And two, like, you can't do that. And two, no, this explicitly says like your careers and your solo careers too. So not just the group, but your solo stuff too. And when they confronted him about it, he was like, oh, that's standard, or, oh, I didn't know that was in there. I'll fix it and get it sent back. It's not a problem. Don't worry. That's an accident.
Yeah.
Back multiple turns back where it was just like just as bad as it always was, probably hoping that there wasn't someone to read the contract on the other end. And he even said, I'll get you an attorney to read it. I was like, geez, dude, this is really shady. And this guy's high up there.
Yeah, there are definitely those people out there. But if I tell you 10 stories of like things that worked out amazing, what are people going to remember?
Yeah, you don't remember the good. Yeah, you're totally right. It's selection bias. Yeah.
To me, there's no reason that you should be getting taken advantage of or you should sign a bad deal these days because one, you have so much access to information. There's lawyers that are accessible, that are quality. You should develop a network so that you can ask somebody to ask somebody. When you get to a certain point in this industry, it's very small, right? So there's nobody, I can't think of anybody that has come to the table in the past 5 or 6 years that if I wanted to, I couldn't get like a little bit of a background. And if I can't get a background check, that's all I need to know, right? Who's this person that's not, there's no, it's not 3, 40 degrees of separate. I got to know somebody that knows somebody that knows this person at some point. And if I don't, that lets me know right then, I probably should keep this person at arm's length. So the fact that there's so much information out there, there's good people willing to help. Just don't sign anything you don't fully understand. And there's no rush, because if somebody's rushing you to sign something, then you got to put your antennas up.
Yeah.
That's
true.
A huge one. Yeah.
Yeah. There should be no what are we rushing in music these days? That would make no sense to me.
Thank God, you came in to do this app, because if you left it up to me, I do have selection bias. I'm only going to tell you the horrible paper I read and none of the stuff where I was like, this is fine. Like I would have them change this term, but other than that, they seem like they got their head on straight. I don't talk about those stories because they're just not eventful. So
there's so many different ways to pursue music. And there's so many different, there shouldn't be anything that's just like typically standard. You can start off with a standard, but then it needs to go up or down according to hella different variables, right? Like a management contract might look totally different depending on if you got Scooter Braun versus somebody that just started managing, right? And what are their roles, or how do you need a manager to plug into what you're doing? So it's important. That's why we have the Music Entrepreneur Club, because it's a constant conversation. I can't really give a blanket answer to anything really, because it's really dependent on where are you at in your career? What does your team currently look like? What is your skill set? What is your long-term goal? What do you want out of this? Do you want to try to be the biggest star ever? Or are you fully comfortable just getting to a point where you are paying your bills and you don't care if anybody notices you when you go to the movie theater or whatever? So there's so many different variables that I think a conversation needs to be had for any type of serious negotiation that's going to have a serious impact on your career, like signing to a label, signing to a manager, things like that.
You're right. Like it's a completely different industry than it ever was. And it's a lot easier to know what you're talking about, find the right people, and not end up in a shady situation than it ever has been. So I love that.
And there's different types of funding available now. There's different types of funding. There's different people that want to get into the music industry, private investors. Sometimes that's tricky. Some people are just like, I saw this Wiz Khalifa interview where he just exaggerated how easy it is to get money from a private investor.
For him, it is really easy. From his perspective, it's super easy.
But he was talking as if it like other artists could do the same thing. It wasn't just like his current experience. But it's you got to realize sometimes a private investment situation can be way worse than a label situation because these people don't know shit about music. And typically, just in general, music is a bad investment. If you have $1 million and you're like, oh, where am I going to put this $1 million? Are you going to put it? are you going to put it like into some real estate or something? Or are you going to try to build an artist to stardom? Who's going to win in that situation 99 times out of 100?
Yeah, I know where I'm parking my money.
Exactly. People just think music is fun, and you can do it if you do it right. We have an opportunity here to build things independently and be successful, but it's ridiculously hard. And I never try to communicate anything different than that because I just know that if I teach artists the business and then you pursue it the right way, even if you swing and miss and you don't make it in music, you've acquired skills that will allow you to be successful in other ventures. That's why I like teaching the music business like a certain way. Even what we're talking about today, negotiating. We don't just negotiate in music. We negotiate with our wives. We negotiate with children. Like we're negotiating all the time. So it's some of the same.
I actually don't negotiate with my wife because I can't walk away from the table. So it's not a negotiation.
I've seen you negotiate with your 2-year-old though.
Yeah, definitely. It means sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a skill that can be applied to business stuff, life stuff. I think at the end of the day, it's enhancing your emotional intelligence, just so you can become more self-aware. You can pick up on things, especially in the moment when you're negotiating, just hearing the tone, whether how you're communicating with via email or a video conference or whatever. Just being a more emotionally intelligent person will help you negotiate for sure.
Have you read Never Split the Difference?
I haven't.
It's so good, dude.
It's great.
The second after I read it, I started applying it to like business. And if I have a particularly difficult confrontation in life, I will just apply everything from that book into it. And it's really about, because what you said about emotional intelligence, it's really about the main lessons, takeaways I had from the book was like, basically ask them to talk about how they feel and then try to get them to confirm that your recitation of what they just said is correct. So you just tell them back, it sounds like this, you said this, is this right? And they're like, that's right, that's how I feel. And even if you knew nothing else beyond that, it changes the conversation completely. Like they really feel understood. And what that taught me is to, when I'm reviewing contracts, to start to think about, if this clause seems like it's bad for your friend or your client, why did they put it in here? What are they worried about? Because they're worried about something, and that's why they put this here. And if you can understand that, it takes the maliciousness out of bad terms, and it more says they're just trying to protect themselves. What are they trying to do here?
Yeah. And then also sometimes with these contracts, some people are just like copy and paste. They genuinely didn't know like why that shit's in. They don't know why tradition carries down, but that's, all right, cool. We'll remove it. All right, let's keep it moving. I don't need to think that you were trying to do something evil. Let's remove it, keep it moving. Because at the end of the day, we both want to get this deal done.
Yeah, I generally try to presume that they'll have no problem with us changing this. Because, yeah, you're right. Like, a lot of the times, like, they're like, I don't know what's in the contract.
It's just a bunch of legal jargon in there to justify paying the lawyer what you pay them. Because I don't know what it means. Shit.
Dude, it's super good getting your perspective on all this as someone who's been through a wide range of negotiations, because my experience is more limited to reading legalese and then interpreting it for people. So I super appreciate like the boots on the ground, like tactical application of all this stuff.
It's my pleasure, man, because I see opportunities fumbled all the time. I see assumptions being made, just misalignments. And it's just, man, you got to be able to work with people to progress in this industry. If you just plan on being in your room and doing your thing. I mean, I know a few artists that just kind of are self-service. They don't really talk to anybody and they just run their streams up or whatever. But if you really want to make an impact in this industry, you're going to have to build with a lot of people. So build good karma, do right by people, and do what you say you're going to do. And you typically will build some healthy relationships.
Dame, you are hitting the road to talk about maybe some of this, but talk about music and the industry quite a bit. What's up with the tour? Tell us about it. Tell everybody where they can find you over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, so Two Lost in partnership with my guy Ray Daniels over at the God Show, we have come up with a new live event called Game from the Gods. There are no panels, so this is something different. It's a different live music industry experience. It's more interactive, like gamified sessions where you should come ready to participate. Don't just come to expect to hear us talk and you go home, because we don't feel like people really retain info like that. So we're going to be playing games, giving away prizes. We got a bunch of gear from Mackie to give away, some headphones, and we're just going to make it fun. We'll have a DJ, Nyla Simone will be with us. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be in Atlanta, DC, Philly, and New York. So we're trying it out in 4 different cities. If it does well, we'll roll it out to more cities across the country. So I'm hoping people come out to these first 4 so we can continue to improve it, make it bigger. But hopefully it's an experience people come out and enjoy and have a lot of fun. But please come ready to participate. Don't come to be a fly on the wall. Come with your ideas, come with your team, because we're going to be covering a lot of topics.
Man, that's exciting. What's the first date? When do you guys kick off?
So we're in Philly on October 9th. We are in DC on October 11th, Atlanta on the 12th, and then New York on the 14th. I mean, you can go to gamefromthegods.com. That's Gods, Gauds. It stands for Goats and Underdogs. That's what Ray Daniels' podcast is. So it's not God. Like, we don't think that we're almighty gods. It stands for Goats and Underdogs. So it's Game from the Gods, Gauds. Please come out. We would love for as many people as possible to experience this, so that, have a good time, win some stuff, learn some stuff, network, possibly promote yourself. So we'll have a good time.
We'll make sure to link to the tickets in the show notes. And for all y'all listening, if you're in the cities that Dame's coming to, you're getting a chance to hang out with him and kick it and learn from him. I can't recommend it enough. So get out there, enjoy. Dame, thanks again for joining us today, man.
My pleasure. Anytime, fellas, anytime.
All right, Indies. Hope you guys dug this. We'll catch you next time on Creative Juice.
East Coast, West Coast, say what?